Well, welcome everyone. My name is Greg Fox. I'm the director of the Program for International Legal Studies here at Wayne Law School. And thank you all for coming, especially if you came from outside the law school. We're very, very happy to be able to present a film which I guarantee you haven't seen anywhere else, Seeking Truth in the Balkans, and to have the two filmmakers, Erin Lovall and Vutrano, here to talk about the process of making the film and the ideas underlying the film. So they will make some brief opening remarks. We'll then watch the film, and then afterwards we'll have a discussion, which I very strongly urge you to stay for, which will include the two filmmakers, but also two other experts on the issues presented in the film. Carrie Booth Walling from the Political Science Department at Albion College, and Brad Roth, a colleague of mine here at Wayne Law School and also appointed in the Wayne Political Science Department. So it should be a very intellectually robust 2 hours, and why don't we start with June?
Hi, thank you for having us. Thanks for coming. Just to give you a very brief overview of where this film came from, I'm going to give you first the beginning that this still is a work in progress. So there are points in the film where you're going to be like, okay, no, we're still editing. So just a warning. We did interview over 75 people for this film, so it was a lot of material to go through. We are both graduates of New York University's Global Affairs program, where we studied human rights and international law, and we got a master's for this project. That was our capstone project. The impetus for the project was that we had gone on a field intensive with the university the summer prior to The Hague and to the Balkans region. And when we left, we were confused. We saw a disconnect between justice and the human rights. And that's what gave us the impetus to go and explore. So that's just a brief.
And just as like a side note, I am a lawyer. I graduated from Lovall in 2001. I practiced as a corporate bankruptcy attorney for 10 years, and then decided to switch gears into international law and human rights. And the only reason I tell you that is as students, law students, is that I think there are a lot of paths you can take with your law degree. So this kind of the limit, and I'm sure Professor Fox will tell you that international law and human rights is an excellent area, and it's a really exciting place to head your career at this particular time. So that's my plug.
Okay, thanks very much. Let's see if I can get this to work. Here we go. Wonderful. Well, I think I will stay away from making substantive comments in the interest of time so we can hear from everyone and then hear your questions. So why don't we start with Erin and June, if you would like to comment on something about the film, or if you, I think, try to stay out of the process as much as possible, because obviously you're not on camera, but I'm sure after conducting, what must have been hundreds of interviews, you do have your own opinions. So if you'd just like to give some of your thoughts, and then we just move sequentially across to Carrie and Brad.
Our goal really when we came up with the idea of this project was to come in without an agenda, not pick a side, not have a narrative built at the beginning. So we just we met with over 100 people, we had 75 plus film interviews. We had a couple of themes that we kept hitting and asking people. What is the ICTY's events? What is their contribution or lack thereof to peace, reconciliation, and justice? And then we just listened. And as those conversations went on, we heard a lot of themes that we tried to present in the film. People kept saying a lot of the same things. That the ICTY really has not contributed to reconciliation as part of its mandate, or that they have provided criminal justice in a way, but that a lot of people in the region feel like aren't experiencing a form of justice. Like that they have the rule of law, but not justice. Those sorts of themes kept emerging, and so once we started to see those themes, we wanted to put all that in the film so that people could see those themes, and also a lot of the competing opinions, as you can see. There isn't one single narrative, there are a lot of narratives.
I'm just going to agree with what Erin just said, that it depends on who you were speaking to and what perspective they were coming from. If you're an international law professional, this was the greatest thing that ever happened, and it's really advanced global justice. However, the frightening part for me is that after all of that effort, when we go back to the region, we don't feel that it transformed any part of the society. The people that are transforming society over there are the human rights activists, the victims groups, and it didn't translate. And I kind of had always thought that justice kind of translated to the ground at some point. So that's what made me want to investigate this. And I don't have any answers per se, but I have all these perspectives that I can lay out and see. So I'm very interested in like audience questions as well as to like what you're curious about after watching the film. So
Well, I think it was a really fabulous film in so many ways, and I really liked the great diversity of opinions that you saw among participants from the ICTY, both positive and negative, about the experience. And there's so much to be said about so many different aspects of that. One thing I thought, though, in terms of the people within the region, that we focus very much on these transitional justice people, very much on these people who are kind of liberal universalists looking at all of this. And there is a whole other side of all of this. And it's hard to know what to say about them. I mean, some of them have been remarkably opportunistic in the way that they have transformed themselves. If you find on YouTube, it's a wonderful thing. If you find on YouTube an old video from about 2004 of a rally in Belgrade in support of Vojislav Šešelj, and the two key figures in this are the current president and the current prime minister of Serbia, Tomislav Nikolic and Alexander Vučić. They get huge applause where Vučić reads a defiant message from Šešelj from being in The Hague in captivity and all of this. People drink this Kool-Aid, and people drink it in Croatia too, and Croatia is missing in a lot of this, I feel. And I have a lot of experience with Croatia and a lot of frustration with Croatia. One of the things is that you have a new president of Croatia who has just come to office after a narrow election representing HDZ, the Nationalist Party. The first thing she said was, "No one will call our homeland war a civil war." I consider that partly directed at me personally because I'm actually part of a project with some dissidents in Croatia that's about to put out an issue of the Croatian Political Science Review, which will characterize it as a civil war. But there is all of this confrontation of narratives here, and I think it was a mistake for anyone to think that the ICTY could cure that. I think that criminal tribunals cannot deal with the macro history, in part because proving up the elements of particular criminal causes of action doesn't scratch the surface of what it takes to actually have a historical perspective on any of these things. But what it did accomplish was the micro history, that it creates a kind of record that makes it pretty much undeniable who did what to whom with whose knowledge when. And I think in terms of the future of the region, that is really the signal contribution of the ICTY. One other thing I would say in terms of systemically, I have mixed feelings about the ICTY in terms of its contribution to international criminal jurisprudence, but one thing that it has done for the international legal order above all is it has turned the term ethnic cleansing into this international term of opprobrium. People used to talk about population transfer, and they used to talk about it seriously and normatively. Wouldn't it be a good idea if we could move these populations around so that they would not be in conflict with one another? Nobody talks that way anymore, and the ICTY is crucial to having accomplished that.
Thinking about this question about whether or not we view the ICTY as a success or what its accomplishments are, that we have to ask ourselves compared to what. because there's a lot of different ways to compare its contributions. So to the ideal of transitional justice, or the goals that were laid out with the document that helped to create it in terms of these kind of laudatory kind of goals and ideals, whether or not we compare it to other courts and tribunals, or whether we compare it to what would have happened in the absence of, or compare it to the Truth Commission. So there's a lot of different ways to get at and think about what is successful, what do we take out of the ICTY. I think that what I've come to think about courts over the time that I've been looking at international courts and tribunals is that what they do well is what they were designed to do, which ultimately is individual criminal accountability, and that they determine the guilt or innocence of particular perpetrators or particular crimes. And through its rulings, that it also reasserts the fundamental norms of society that must be respected, norms like human rights, rule of law, the idea that an individual, no matter how powerful they are not above the law. So I think it's really good at doing that stuff, but I think that we do a disservice and oversell things if we try to get it to do a lot more than that and think about it as contributing to peace or to reconciliation, or to assume that it will just automatically do those things. There's one real quick point that I would add that I think is a perspective maybe that isn't really touched on in the film, but one thing that I thought about more in a personal aspect is that one of the interesting things I think about those international courts and tribunals is that in some respects they're world courts. And I know that many of us here, but some of you, audience who may have the opportunity, or if you ever have the opportunity, you can go and you can attend these trials and sit into the audience. And I think one of the things that the court has contributed, which again is maybe not a lot about the Balkans, but in terms of international society and global norms, is this idea that there are certain crimes that are committed against all of us, and there's a place that you can go to see those crimes adjudicated. So I would say that's something that is a perspective that doesn't come out a lot in the film, but I think it's an important contribution.
Great, thank you. We have a microphone here.
If anybody has a question, I will give that to the first person and you can pass it on.
Thank you very much for the documentary. And one of the things it brought up that was very interesting to me is one of the interviewees talked about how prosecuting heads of state is actually one of the goals of such tribunals, and at the same time it's one of the difficult things. So I was wondering if it's perhaps possible to address that question. What are some of the issues, I mean, not just with Milosevic, but in general in prosecuting heads of state, and kind of why is it so challenging? Because if part of it is to target the top of the system, why is it so hard to get these? I know in Gaddafi's case, Gaddafi was one of the people kind of referenced in the background. The issue has been, one of the issues that I know has been extraditing the son, but why is it so hard, and kind of how that fits in?
First and foremost, I suppose the difficulty is getting hold of heads of state, and the problems with the president of Sudan and the problems with the president of Kenya, both indicted by the ICC, demonstrate that as long as somebody is holding office and is therefore able to use a bully pulpit to generate sympathy, or in the case of Kenya, to bully witnesses into not testifying, it's very difficult to have a case go forward. Another reason, and I've kind of lost track of this, and maybe the people who have studied the tribunal always say that I have to tell me, but at least initially there was no plea bargaining in the tribunal. I don't know if that has changed at all.
I don't think there's formal plea bargaining, but there's...
Right. I mean, and I think so. But as an official policy, I think it's still not practiced, and that is a result of a clash between the common law systems and civil law systems. I think in civil law systems there simply isn't plea bargaining. It's seen as very much a dereliction of a prosecutor's duty to reduce charges against somebody against whom you have evidence to prove higher charges. And when the person in the film was talking about the difficulty of getting direct evidence of the culpability of the head of state, I thought about the way prosecutors in the U.S. do mafia prosecutions. How do you do that? You get somebody at the low level, you bring them in, you flip them, they testify against the guy who's next up the food chain, you bring him in, you flip him, and pretty soon you have people who were direct underlings of the president, and they're all willing to testify. But if that is not possible structurally in the ICTY, then you're exactly in the situation that I think Dan Saxon described, where all you have is inferences, circumstantial evidence. You don't have the captured archives of the leader's regime, as you did with Nazis, who were meticulous about writing everything down. There are probably many other reasons that people want to mention.
Well, there are a lot of different issues in different contexts. So, in the typical circumstance, of course, you can't get at these people because they're running their countries. There's also the question of immunity, which is not an issue in international criminal tribunals, but is an issue where states seek to assert jurisdiction on the basis of what's called universal jurisdiction, where people could be tried in international, for international crimes in domestic courts, but that can't typically be done as a result of immunity. But usually what you have with these people who are former heads of state, and so it's easier to get at them, and we have the example of credible efforts to get at them, starting with Augusto Pinochet, the former dictator of Chile, who was thought he was senator for life. He thought he was perfectly immune, and he was off to England to have tea with Baroness Thatcher. And lo and behold, there was a warrant for his arrest, and he was detained for a long period of time in England, having to fight these charges, and actually would have been extradited to Spain to stand trial, except for humanitarian reasons. He was sent back to Chile, which got the whole story about that. But the Milosevic thing, though, the problem here was you had 3 heads of state, 2 of whom died before they could be indicted, unfortunately. Milosevic was on trial for over 4 years before he dropped dead. And this was a real problem, and you hear like there's 66 different things. He was tried altogether for 3 different armed conflicts. For the conflict in Croatia, primarily in 91-92, conflict in Bosnia 92 to 95, conflict in Kosovo 98-99. And that was, I think, everyone I think understands in retrospect, that was a huge strategic mistake to aggregate all of that. And people tried to blame it on the fact that too much latitude was given to the defense. Milosevic famously defended himself. It's great to go to The Hague, by the way, to watch this. It was the greatest show on earth for 4 years, to watch Milosevic defend himself. But really the problem was aggregating all of those things that really made it impossible to do this in an expeditious way. And I think also was unfortunate in other terms too, that it sought to make, by doing that, sought to make a kind of historical statement that probably a criminal court should not have been trying to make.
I just want to add something about the prosecutors taking on too much in the Milosevic case. I think that points out the kind of dual and untenably dual role that the ICTY was put in. If you look at the criminal prosecutions from the perspective of the victims, and so you ask the tribunal to do justice for them or provide them with a sense of reconciliation, it makes complete sense to charge him in every conflict in which he was the head of state. Because how can you possibly say to the family of the victim in Bosnia that their dead son is less important than the dead son of a family in Kosovo? To provide justice to victims, you have to bring up all of Milosevic's crimes. On the other hand, if you're asking the tribunal simply to do a good job as a criminal court, then the whole process breaks down. It's too much, too long, it becomes too complicated, it gives Milosevic too much control over the proceedings, people lose interest, etc. And it seems to me that the inability to pick one of those, or perhaps find a happy medium, resulted in nobody being happy. Other questions or
Just before I begin, I'd like to say thank you very much for this film. I come from a background in the region. I'm an ethnic Albanian from Montenegro. So I've been to the region. I've seen areas in Kosovo, land riddled in graves, and people who still think about the things that happened, the duration of the wars. They still think about it every day. It's still alive in their lives. My question is, Nuremberg sort of did a good job at targeting the leadership of Germany, and then sort of getting everybody down the line in all areas of the government. And then after Nuremberg, we see a period in Germany of denazification. Now, whether that was through the assistance of the Allies or whether the Germans did it themselves, it seems like I haven't seen in the Balkans in all of my travels a sort of system of denationalization. In many areas, I see that it's alive and well. There's a resurrection of former heroes that maybe have a relationship to the ethnicity or the religious group in the region. There's areas like Gazimestan that are still alive and well and guarded by the United Nations. We even had population transfers by the United Nations in Kosovo, from Mitrovica, really polarizing the two populations, having one with allegiance to their own ethnic group. I guess my question is, where can we move forward? How can what can the outside actors, past the ICTY, do to really, bring about a denationalization of this area?
Legal expert, but just in the comparison with Nuremberg, it did take Germany like 3 generations to move beyond. And as we know, the population of Germany was not a big fan of the Nuremberg trials. They weren't all about. And there was kind of an occupation, and they were in a situation. I think the Balkans were slightly different in that regard. And as you say, the war is still very present right now. And they're now like this mono-ethnic region where they used to be very united before the wars. So now they've all been separated. I'm not sure what the results would be of that. You're not under threat of the other because now you're not with them anymore. So it could be good, it could be bad. I think it's going to take generations for people to work this out. And as was pointed out in the film, the EU idea of joining the EU, I think keeps things very tempered there. The economic needs and the unemployment rate over there is insane. It's like people over 25, it's like 70% of the population. So they're really very dependent on finding economic solutions. So that may help them in the long run if they start looking in that direction. Nationalism is definitely rampant in some parts, but it's pockets, and we have that here in this country as well. We're very extreme. I think it's gonna be a while. I'm not sure if everything that could be done has been done that could help. That's not.
One thing that would help a lot would be a new constitution. The peace agreement that was set up was really designed to be at cross purposes with the tribunal that was also set up, I think, solidifying those differences. And in addition to that, I think that if the goals really are about common historical record, even if everybody doesn't agree on everything, but some basic common historical record that's more expansive about the societal and group dynamics and not just the individual dynamics of who did what to whom, then you need a lot more happening at the grassroots level. A lot of one of the great things in the film is showing the hope and the optimism and a lot of the great work that is being done at the grassroots level and among a younger generation. But that if you want to achieve these outcomes, it is a long-term project, but it has to include a multitude of a variety of mechanisms and approaches. It's going to be not just the trial. And I guess one of the downsides of the tribunal is that since it was such a radical moment and experiment and felt like such an accomplishment and was such a lofty moment when it was created, that maybe one of the big services was like, oh, that's going to take care of things. And there was such a focus on that there was an assumption that things would just kind of trickle down, as you said, that there was a real missed opportunity, real failures to engage the local population and empower the local population to really take on these issues. Now that said, it's really hard, right, in the aftermath of war, because you don't even, you need to feed people, and you've got school systems that need to be reconstructed, and you've got an economy that need to be reconstructed. And so it's also just a really difficult environment to work in, but I agree, it's just generations. And I like that you ended the film the way that you did, because I think that even though there's a lot of bad news and a lot of concern, at least I felt like someone can walk away from this saying, you know, there's something that can be done here and can be done differently, and there's people there, young people in the generation who maybe will take that charge. So I appreciated that ending.
One of the other issues that's not really addressed in the film is memorialization. We went to the region. There is this unfortunate phenomenon of either competitive memorialization or complete lack thereof. So you'll have an area where, you know, Bosnian Muslim men were children were massacred, and the only memorial that's there is for Bosnian Serb soldiers who died. And because of the ethnic cleansing and who's in control of a certain area, it really determines a lot of the time who gets to be remembered in a certain area. And it all kind of comes down to this lack of shared narrative, specifically in Bosnia. I think that's, but when we went to Croatia, which is now a member of the EU, you know, Gotovina, who's a Croatian general responsible for Operation Storm, he was acquitted at the ICTY, and he was welcomed as a war hero. Now, I mean, an interesting side note of that is that he didn't really want to participate in being a war hero. He wanted to go back to his life and not be a part of the nationalist narrative. But it is, I think it's part of the healing process, and as June mentioned, as Professor Walling mentioned, it takes time. But I think memorialization is important. And there are certain areas where, for instance, at the Srebrenica massacre occurred, over 8,000 unarmed civilians. There is a wonderful memorial to that, but the UN had to come in and say this is UN land, and we are going to put a memorial here. That was not a grassroots, bottom-up, you know, effort. And so I think, to your point, I think that is an important part of the healing and reconciliation.
If you could just say something about using Nuremberg as the kind of ideal and thinking about whether this measures up in Nuremberg or not. You know, Nuremberg has an extraordinarily important place in international law, but I think we shouldn't make too much of its role in making Germany what it is today. I mean, so Germany was a single ethnic national country, not divided up into small ethnicities, and it was headed by one Nazi party. And so banning that party, banning all its symbols, trying to identify its individual leaders and take them out of public life, which, by the way, was not complete by at least the West German government was full of Nazis, you know, from the 1950s and 60s. Some of them even came here and helped us develop rocket programs. That was one big target that could be taken down. And so all Nazi symbols, expression of support for the Nazi party was outlawed in Germany, and still to this day that those symbols cannot be displayed in public. You know, there are still, you know, I don't know, tens of thousands of American troops in Germany. The occupation of West Germany didn't end until 1955, so there was a massive on-the-ground presence. And Germany's reconstruction is also, you know, largely dependent on the Marshall Plan, and so there was enormous economic leverage there. The German school curriculum was reformed to make sure that every German child saw these graphic pictures of the concentration camps to know exactly what was done you know, by the government. And it had, I think, the intended effect. You know, there was a very substantial transformation in German public life. have something like that in Bosnia. You have a high commissioner of Bosnia who is empowered to kick elected officials out of office and rescind laws that are contrary to the spirit of Dayton. But maybe Brad can probably comment more on
what a mess. Well, because the war had no decisive outcome, you created a constitution that institutionalized deadlock, and then there was this need for the High Commission to deal with those sorts of issues. If people talk about Nuremberg in this reverential way, it was not jurisprudentially a piece of a thing of beauty to start with. It was very much improvised, and it was better than the alternatives, which usually would have entailed like taking people out and shooting them. But you remember that only one side was prosecuted at Nuremberg. The Soviet Union killed millions of prisoners of war. The Americans and the British firebombed Hamburg and Dresden. There were terrible things that were done on different sides of that war that no one made any effort to try to address, and indeed certain things had to be avoided at Nuremberg because it turned out that our side had done a lot of the same thing. The remarkable thing about the ICTY, and it's not true of the ICTR, and it's not true of other efforts at criminal justice, has been that different sides of the war have all been prosecuted, some with much greater success than others, and people are very angry among the Serbs that Gotovina was acquitted, and that Haradinaj was acquitted, and Haradinaj, the Kosovar leader, was acquitted possibly because witnesses were intimidated successfully, and so there's a lot of bad things that happened. But the fact that people were prosecuted from different sides of the war made the ICTY, I think, a really remarkable project, and one that has much greater staying power jurisprudentially in some ways than the Nuremberg project.
Other questions, comments?
Hey, I have one quick question. What is the second song in that?
Most of the music from that film is from Smithsonian Folkways. It's free use, and it's public because it's folk music, so it's part of our history. And it's all from the former Yugoslavia, when it was one. So that way we didn't pick what we were going to play a Croatian song or a Serbian song. So we went with, old folk music, which is free use.
If you give us your email, we can the actual name of it.
Thanks.
I have a question for the filmmakers to make sense. But so at the beginning of the film, it was rated T, right? So I wanted to hear your comment on that and your choice. And I don't know if everybody caught that or not, but
So the film is rated T for truth because, as Erin and I mentioned, that we went out there with no agenda. We wanted to hear what people honestly thought or felt about the tribunal, and we wanted to put that forward in the movie, that if somebody hated the tribunal or was really against something, that they're going to say it and we're going to hear it. We weren't trying to say, oh, this is the greatest thing that ever happened. We wanted to show both sides.
And I think truth is, we're not saying, oh, we found the truth, here it is, here's the narrative, and here's everything you need to know right here. And what we were trying to say is truth is it depends on your perspective. And I know that I don't say that as a cop-out, it's just that people experience an event, and because of their background or because of what was going on in their lives, they see the exact same event in remarkably different ways. And so when we say seeking truth, it's not like there is one truth. I mean, there are certain things where you can say this is facts, this happened. But people, individual people on the ground, experience it in a very different way. And that's what we were really trying to show, is that even though we know what happened in the war, the ICTY has actually done a fantastic job of big picture, 30,000-foot view of what happened. But individuals